Hi, I'm Rachel, a resource expert and career coach for museum educators who are stretched thin but long to fall in love with their world-changing work. After over 15 years with my own hands in the glitter, I know how it feels when your board thinks your work is childish because you work with children. I know how hard it is to lead a tour on a difficult subject, and I know the frustration of waiting on a school bus that is 20 minutes late. Or worse, 10 minutes early. As I'm heading towards the second half of my career, I find myself with a passion to help my fellow educators reverse the chronic state of being overworked and underappreciated so that they can reclaim their creativity and emotional energy. Join me and my museum buddies as we share our best tips, tricks, and techniques for modern museum education. Welcome to the 12 Days of Christmas Museum Education Edition, my holiday gift to the museum educator community. For the next 12 days, I'll be releasing a bite-sized podcast episode stuffed with actionable tips and, as always, grounded in current research to help you level up your museum education programs. So today's episode is Beyond Glitter and Glue. Let's reimagine museum education programs for real impact. Okay, so if you've spent any time at all on my website, you know that I love glitter and glue. But also, I have a deep conviction that no craft or activity should happen in our programs just because. I was recently talking about this with a professor. I'm in the beginning stages of planning my dissertation on the use of play in museums. And this professor told me a story about how she was taking her grandchildren to a museum over the summer. And the museum offered a scavenger hunt of the galleries, but she felt like the activity was, and these were her words, cheap. And not in terms of the financial cost, but in terms of the quality, because it was clearly just something to keep the kids busy while the adults did the real learning. And this burns me up. My huge soapbox is that museum programs, all tours, and all exhibits should be planned for the specific use of children. In fact, my opinion on this subject is so ginormous that I had to go back to school to get a PhD to support the weight of my spicy take about kids in museums. So let's talk about why crafting just to craft belongs in the past of museum education. Let's dive into why every crafting activity that we design should be more than just a fun distraction. It should be a powerful storytelling tool that aligns seamlessly with our mission, and it should transform simple projects into impactful educational experiences. This is really, really important. And so let's go through the steps of how we can level up the crafts and activities that we offer to children in our programs. The first thing is that you need to understand your museum's core mission. This is crucial. This isn't just some lofty statement tucked away on your webpage. This is the heartbeat of everything that you do in your museum, or at least it should be. When it comes to education, our role is to breathe life into that mission, making it accessible and engaging for all visitors. The days of crafting for craft's sake are gone. Instead, let's turn our attention to missional crafts, projects that not only entertain, but also educate and inspire by reflecting our museum's themes. So imagine designing an activity that not only results in an adorable piece of art or a fun memory, but also actually really impactfully deepens the participants' connection with the exhibit or the narrative theme that you're trying to teach them. This is where we want to head. So when we align crafts with our museum's mission, something magical happens. Visitor engagement skyrockets because they see and feel the relevance of what they're creating. They're not just making something, they're connecting with history, art, science, whatever your focus may be. They're connecting with it on a deep level. Okay, so let me give you a couple of examples. Years and years and years ago, I was planning, this was for a summer camp, and I needed to create name tags for the kids. They were like middle school age kids. This was a junior docent camp. So the kids would come and we would teach them all about historic preservation and exhibit design and also how to give tours. So there was public speaking and we wrote little tours, and it was actually a really fun camp. I really enjoyed it. But I needed name tags for the kids that first couple of days. So I thought it would be fun to create a craft to make the name tags. And y'all, I don't have any idea what in the world possessed me. But for some reason, I thought, you know what's fun? Shrinky dinks. Shrinky dinks are fun. Do you remember Shrinky dinks? I hope you know what I'm talking about. If you don't know what Shrinky dinks are, they're like this specific kind of plastic that you color on, and then you bake it in the oven and it shrinks. They were very popular when I was a kid back in the 80s. Anyways, did you know you can still get Shrinky Dink material? In fact, you can get, or at least you could, this was like maybe 10 or 15 years ago, but you could get like plain Shrinky Dink material, just like a sheet of it, like a 8.5 by 11 plain sheet. So, and I guess you could run it through the copy machine because I printed something on it. Like I printed the reverse image of our education mascot, and then I colored it maybe. I can't even remember exactly. This is my point. I don't even remember what I did because it was literally a craft for craft's sake. It had absolutely no connection to anything that I was teaching the kids. But the point, well, not the point, but incidentally, it was a complete and utter fail because I could not make these Shrinky Dinks work. I spent hours trying to figure out how to make these work. And every time I baked them in the oven, they completely curled up weirdly. It was an absolute total crafting fail. And I'm glad that it was because, again, that craft had nothing to do with anything. It was fun. And there's nothing wrong with fun. And, and I am researching the role of play. And you guys know I'm a huge fan of Dr. John Falk's work. And he talks a lot about the importance of personal engagement and the role of fun. It's important. I get it. It is important. But also, we are not just about having fun. Like the fun needs to connect, right? If we're doing a program that has a teaching element, the fun needs to connect to what we want people to come away with knowing. So to contrast that Shrinky Dink fail, I also did another craft that week where we took brown paper craft boxes and we Mod Podged them. And we Mod Podged them with pictures of objects from the collection. So what I did was I gave each kid a disposable camera. It wasn't a very big camp. Obviously, this would have been a cost prohibitive craft if there had been like at scale, but this was just a small group of kids. And we gave them a disposable camera and I let them each it was like a camera that had maybe like 12 exposures, and they could take a picture with, of any 12 objects in the collection. And incidentally, using a disposable camera where they couldn't see the picture and they could only there were only 12 clicks was quite the experience for a lot of these kids who'd only ever used cameras that were like on a cell phone. Anyways, then I got the pictures developed and we then took those pictures and Mod Podged these boxes. So it was this sort of souvenir take-home craft that had pictures of 12 objects that they personally connected with. They were 12 objects that in their little tours that they were writing, that they were highlighting. And, I made my own craft box that week as well. And I still have my box. It's in the top of my closet. I keep things in it. I don't even work for that museum anymore. And I still have that box because that craft meant something. It was connected to actual objects in the collection. And that is the point. When you are doing crafts and activities, you need to make sure that they are connecting with the point of what you're teaching. And it might be the narrative theme of your program. It ought to connect to the mission of your site. So it is really important to me that the resources that I am putting out, this podcast and anything on my website, helps to bridge the gap between scholarship and practice for museum educators. Because I know that when you're in the field every day, day in and day out, you don't have time to read all of the latest research. And I do have time to read it, and it's what I enjoy doing, and I am doing a lot of it. And so I want to share with you some of the interesting and important research that I'm finding. So I want to share with you a little bit from a book called Activity-Based Teaching in the Art Museum, Movement, Embodiment, Emotion. And I'll put a link to where you can find this book on Amazon in the show notes so that you can find the ISBN number and the author's names, and you can get this if you want to find out more about it. So this book is all about how to incorporate playful movement into art gallery museums. So it's very specifically written for art museums, but history and science museums, there's a lot in here for you as well. So in this book, the authors point out that people have been drawing in museums since the foundation of museums. People go into art museums and they do a lot of drawing. But as they note, sometimes educators just let people draw, especially children. They just let them draw. And there is value in just drawing whatever feels interesting to you. Again, this connects back to John Falk's research, Lynn Dierking's research, the visitor identity and motivations and the well-being needs that museums meet. This is all important. But let's consider for a second the value in a more intentional activity. What the authors of this book suggest is observational drawing or contour drawing. So in this more intentional activity, you replace just free drawing with an activity that is holistically engaging the visitor. It's something that is encouraging close looking, which is going to encourage an appreciation of both the artwork and the artist. So it's going to encourage visitors, particularly children here, we're talking about, to look closely at the objects and to look for details. This is going to allow you, it's going to open up the door for you to have conversations about the piece itself, its role in the world, the artist, or the maker. So let me read you a couple of quotes from this book. So in this case, observational drawing is where you're going to look closely at a piece of art and try to draw it. Or contour drawing is where you look closely at a particular object and you just trace the outline of it. You don't try to draw any of the details on the inside, you just draw the outline. Conversely, you can not draw the object, but you can shade where it is in space so that you end up with this sort of shaded picture. So there's a couple of options that the authors are suggesting that might sort of level up your just regular drawing craft. So this is what they write. Students discover things as they draw. And they go on to say, what students discover and learn about objects is more important than whether or not their drawings look like the objects. How does the hand inform the eye? When does the eye need the hand? The hand helps capture and elucidate fine detail and also tests visual hypotheses. The hand and the drawn line answer questions that the eye asks. How smooth or rough is this surface? Where does this surface turn away? Similarly, each line drawn asks to be confirmed or contradicted by the eye. Eye and hand learn from each other to the point that the eye learns to draw while the hand begins to see. So this is an example of an up-leveled activity, where instead you could have just been drawing in the art museum. Here, let's invite students to do something a little bit more holistically engaged. But I get it. We are all running around like headless chickens sometimes, and it might feel like there's just not enough time to fully renovate every program that you have and all of the activities. So don't necessarily look at this as a challenge to go backwards and fix everything, but maybe look at this as a challenge to go forwards. So anytime you add a new activity, or if you're building a new program over this next year, what can you do to link the activities to something that's maybe a little bit more holistic, maybe something that's connected more specifically to your mission, maybe something that's connected more specifically to the narrative that you're trying to teach. And a really important key in this is to make sure that your staff, or especially if you rely on volunteers to run your education programs, you have to tell them why you're doing what you're doing. So tell them specifically, we are doing this activity because it relates to this topic that we're talking about on the tour. Or we are doing this activity because it allows children to meet this particular learning objective. Or we are doing this activity because it allows for a connection between their body and their brain. or we are doing this activity because it offers a movement or a brain break from an otherwise heavy learning experience. Every activity that you do should have a so what involved. We are doing this because it meets this need on our tour. And it might be something as simple as we're going to let them run around because they're going to need that space after having been quiet on a 45-minute tour. It might be we're going to encourage them to do close looking because we want them to engage their whole bodies and their brains while they're looking at this artwork. We're going to have them do this craft because it's going to connect to the meaningful part of the tour. So whatever it is, make sure that your craft and activity has a so what component. Why are you doing what you're doing? If you can't tell me the reason for every activity, then you shouldn't be doing that activity. To craft for craft's sake is your mother's museum education. And I said what I said. You should be specifically connecting every activity, every part of your tour to a particular outcome. And that doesn't have to be a learning outcome like an objective or a curriculum connection, but it needs to have a reason. You need to be doing this for your visitor for some particular reason. Okay, so there you have it. So if you are ready to ditch the random craft projects in favor of something more meaningful, you can start by revisiting your museum's core themes. You can start by thinking carefully about everything you want students or children or families to come away with on your tour, including not just what you want them to learn, but how you want them to feel, what you want them to experience, and then connect those objectives back to every single activity that you do on your tour. Don't let any second of your program time be wasted on meaningless activities. All right, so here's to making every craft count, and I will see you back tomorrow for day 2 of the 12 Days of Christmas Museum Education Edition. Thank you so much for joining us. If this episode has been helpful to you or interesting, please take a minute to like, subscribe, and leave a review, which will help other museum educators find this resource. As always, if you would like to work with me more directly, have any questions, or would like to be a guest on the podcast, you can find links to all that and more on my website, modernmuseumeducation.com. I'll see you back here next time, and in the meantime, please remember that your work is not childish just because you work with children.